Hello, I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for joining me. We begin with the Israeli politics, and interim Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been hitting the streets attempting to instill fear into the hearts of voters at what he's labelling an emergency conference, a rally held here in Tel Aviv. Netanyahu leading the charge late Sunday, slamming the head of the opposition Blue and White Party, Benny Gantz, who has just a few days left to try and form a government, suggesting that he plans to align with those who support terrorism against Israel by saying that he'll form a minority government.
I tell you that if such a minority government is formed, they'll celebrate in Tehran and Ramallah, and they'll celebrate in Gaza, just like they celebrate after every terror attack. But this would be a historic terror attack against the state of Israel, and it must not happen.
Let's look at some of the reactions so far, with the chairman of the Joint Arab List, Ayman Odeh, saying that there will be no Benjamin interchange or Netanyahu High School, adding that tonight Benjamin Netanyahu marked his legacy as a bitter criminal and a sore loser who hurt and incited against those he was meant to serve. Now, the Blue and White Party responding, saying that the residents of southern Israel don't warrant an emergency meeting, nor do the patients who lay in the corridors of the hospitals or the elderly and disabled, adding, as usual, Netanyahu only cares about Netanyahu. Now, joining me here in the studio is Daniel Ben-Simon, who's a journalist and former member of Israeli Parliament from the Labour Party, and, of course, our diplomatic correspondent, Ellie Hockenberg. Thank you both so much for joining me this morning. We've just heard an array of scenarios laid out of what could potentially happen in the next few days. Tell me, what is a really likely scenario? Are there any?
Well, to say what is the most likely scenario, I don't think anyone can really say. But I think that we need to pay attention to what was not said in Netanyahu's speech last night. Indeed, extremely harsh rhetoric. Mr. Ben-Simon will elaborate on that. But in terms of the political stakes, Netanyahu did not mention Avigdor Lieberman and did not mention him at all, meaning that he refrained from lashing out at him, something that we haven't seen for many weeks now. And that comes after an hour-long meeting between Netanyahu and Lieberman last night. Lieberman himself also making an appearance last night, not attacking Netanyahu at all. And when it comes to these two, very long history, turbulent history, no love lost, that's for sure. It might indicate some sort of a progress between the two of them, as the feasibility of Lieberman taking the political risk and joining a minority government supported from the outside by the Joint Arab List is not high. It appears that something might be moving forward between Netanyahu and Lieberman. To say that we are heading to a right-wing government led by Netanyahu with Avigdor Lieberman in it, too early to say, but again, it appears to be a more likely scenario than a minority government on the left with Lieberman in it.
Daniel, what is your take on all of this and these reactions that we just heard?
Yes, I'm asking myself, is it the real Netanyahu? I was in his coalition some 10 years ago with Netanyahu when he was Prime Minister. Ehud Barak was the head of my party. And I must say that he had a good time with Arab members in the corridor. He used to sit with them and have coffee, more with Arabs than with Jews. So I'm asking myself, what is the true Netanyahu? Who is the true one? I mean, the one who's treating the Arabs as traitors, as an enemy of Israel? Or is it something to scare Israelis? That unless I run this country, we can go with the Arabs. But if Benny Gantz or Gabi Ashkenazi or Yair Lapid, it will be a danger. And I'm asking myself, after the speech yesterday, can these people from Blue and White walk in the street with a coalition with the Arabs and be safe and not fear for their life? Because it was such an incitement, such a dangerous one. I don't remember a prime minister talking this way. And this opened a possibility that if Gantz, who was a former chief of staff, I mean a tough guy, and Gabi Ashkenazi, a tougher guy, and Ayalon. These people, I mean, they saw death so many times in front of their eyes. how will they react to Netanyahu's speech? Can they walk with the Arabs, 4 or 5 of them, who will go get their backing, or maybe they will be intimidated?
But you know, we don't even need to go a decade backwards. We need to look at the aftermath of the April elections. The idea of having a right-wing government of Netanyahu with the ultra-Orthodox parties who've had has a long history of collaborating with the Joint Arab List on many social-oriented issues. So the idea of having this sort of a government was not far-fetched. And we can ask the same question about Victor Lieberman, who has had a campaign targeting the ultra-Orthodox. And
right.
Until not so long ago, he said that the same government. So the...
you mean, are they all lying to us?
I wouldn't dare to suggest that. I wouldn't dare.
Okay, let's say that a minority government is formed. How can we expect the Israeli public to react to that?
It won't be for long. I mean, it's 2-3 months just to get Netanyahu out of his home, out of his domicile, if I may use the word. And that's the main target of the opposition, to tell him, Mr. Netanyahu, leave Balfour Street, and then we'll see what happens. You can become defense minister, prime minister, but just get out of there.
But this is also why they're so scared of establishing such a minority government, because they know that this government will not last long, and they need to already get prepared to another campaign season. And with this sort of political climate here, to form such a minority government with the support of the Arab List from the outside.
We don't have answers. We came here just to speculate on the
What do you
answer.
see happening, just briefly, in the next couple of days? Do you see much shifting as to what we're seeing now? Like we're just seeing everything in sort of disarray.
Listen, Lieberman has polls in his pocket. And the polls says that another election will be very bad for him. So he has 48 hours to find a solution, because a third time might be execution for him, political execution, because Israelis will blame him for the loss of money, the loss of energy, the loss of democracy. And he has 48 hours to be creative. So I tell you the truth, I don't want to speculate on this. Will he choose Netanyahu, his arch enemy and arch friend? Which way will he go? And the other ones, former army generals, who Israelis love generals, army generals, left or right. They are members of the club. And what he will choose, I mean, this has never happened before, that one person will decide the fate of this country. And in Lieberman, I wouldn't take a risk. So maybe
no, I've long been saying that, and I think that this is still applicable. Political crunch time is what happens after Benny Gantz will return, or rather will have to give back the mandate to the Israeli president. Then it will be up to Parliament to find a solution, 21 days, in which they will have to find any candidate, Gantz, Netanyahu, anyone else potentially, with 61 members of Parliament backing him to form a coalition. Then we will see perhaps political flexibility underlined as the threat of a third election will become a reality.
Well, I'll certainly be seeing...
It's more likely that we go to the 21-day, yes.
Seeing a lot more of you two in the next couple of days. Daniel Ben-Simon, Eli Hockenberg, thank you so much.
Thank you
very much.
Meanwhile, Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, is blasting US Senator Bernie Sanders for comments suggesting that the US should leverage aid to Israel. Now, in remarks at the Zionist Organization of America Gala in New York, Danon said, quote, Mr. Sanders, a few months on a kibbutz in 1963 can only teach you so much. This referring to the 2020 candidate's repeated mentions of a brief stint in Israel. Now, at the annual J Street conference in Washington last month, Sanders suggested that Israel will have to fundamentally change its policy on Gaza if it wants continued military aid. And we are going out for a short break. Plenty more when we come back. Stay with us.
Whether you're just getting out of bed or starting your day, or you're already hard at work, we cut through the clutter to give you the right dose. Breaking news and top headlines from Israel, the Middle East, and around the world. Politics, pop culture, sports, and music. We track the big stories from the heart of the Middle East. Brace yourself for your daily dose of news.
Politics, economics, business, and technology. Get the real news and the real insight about what's happening around the world. Michelle McCory breaks down the top stories of the day from the Middle East to the U.S. Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Let's now take a look at what is on the cutting edge.
Israel draws and attracts companies globally.
We have a technological revolution that has really changed a lot of people's lives.
People come with a lot of passion to create. It simply drives the business.
We can actually change the world.
Time to wake up with Cheddar. Good morning. Tell me everything.
Come on now. Where do we begin?
The turn of events for this company is absolutely incredible.
Incredible.
Impeachment seems to be the word on everyone's lips.
You guys, I really just want to hurry up because there's an actor I want to go say hi to.
I'll let that go for today.
Welcome back. Iran is condemning the United States for showing support to protesters after an increase in gas prices caused mass demonstrations over the weekend aimed at the Iranian government in many regions of the country. Now, internet has been blocked by Iranian authorities, but leaked videos portray a disturbing image. Our Middle East correspondent Adi Kopelwitz has the details.
An unusual sight in the Islamic Republic of Iran. After 3 days of widespread protests across the country, the revolt against the regime is gaining more and more momentum. In a symbolic move, the statue of Ayatollah Khomeini, founder of the Islamic regime, has been set on fire. Protests started over the weekend following government decision to lower subsidies on gas. A move expected to save Iran over $7 billion a year through a major increase in gas prices, driving thousands to the streets. But after 3 days, no one is chanting about gas prices anymore. The demonstrators' demands now have to do with Iran's foreign policy in the Middle East.
Know what the Islamic Republic does. Billions of dollars in these countries spent on their proxy militias in Yemen, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. So people are tired of it. They see how many billions of dollars goes away, and they have to stay in line for hours for a little cheaper, like food or gasoline. And that angers people.
The demonstrations have turned fatal, with varying reports on the number of casualties, some stating up to 27 killed since the weekend. Violent clashes erupted in many counties, including the capital, Tehran. With internet now blocked in most of the country, coordination between protest organizers is almost impossible, and updates on casualties are becoming rare.
What I want to say is that no one should help these hooligans. No wise and deserving person, interested in his own country, interested in his comfortable life, should help them. They are the hooligans, and not the ordinary people.
Iran's leadership is known to have very short temper towards this kind of demonstrations. Protests of this scale haven't erupted in Iran for over 10 years now, since the Green Uprising was violently suppressed by the IRGC.
Well, the protests in Iran, basically, it's a very risky thing, and for two reasons. One, you know the regime has no reservation in killing you or doing the worst things to you. The regime has shown that they can even kidnap and take hostage your family members. They don't shy away from anything.
While in other countries in the region, such as Lebanon and Iraq, the protesters could affect the political system dramatically, the reality in Iran is different. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei instructed security forces to do what they have to while confronting the protesters, meaning use of excessive force will be made against demonstrators. And with no protection from any of the security forces in the country, the end of these protests seems inevitable.
Protests continue in Hong Kong as a group of demonstrators have barricaded themselves inside a university in a standoff with police. Now, this is the US is warning against the use of excessive force against demonstrators. Here's Alec Pollard with the update.
A standoff in Hong Kong between riot police and protesters barricaded inside a university. Demonstrators have occupied the campus of Polytechnic University for days and have thrown petrol bombs and even bows and arrows at police who have tried to enter the compound. Police have responded with tear gas and water cannons, but still the standoff continues. University staff have called on protesters to turn themselves over to the police, although most of the people left inside are probably not even students.
The police say that all of us inside the university will be arrested for charging riots, and we will be sentenced for 10 years or above.
In a meeting in Thailand between U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper and his counterpart Wei Fengyi, China said it's committed to maintaining order in Hong Kong.
The Chinese troops stationed in Hong Kong follow instructions given by the party's Central Committee and the Central Military Commission at all times. The Hong Kong troops have determination, confidence and capability to implement the Basic Law and the Garrison Law and will carry out their responsibilities.
The incident is just the latest amid protests which have been ongoing for over half a year and are likely to continue in the foreseeable future.
And from on this developing story, let's bring in Isabella Steger, who's the Deputy Asia Bureau Chief at news outlet known as Quartz. Isabella, thank you so much for joining us today. This story really just keeps developing. Every day we're coming into work seeing even more dramatic pictures than the day before. Where do you see this going? How much worse can it get?
I think what's happening is that despite what the authorities are saying, both in Hong Kong and Beijing, about being committed to restoring order, it's quite clear that every single thing that they've done since June to so-called restored order has actually just made things worse. As you said, every day, every weekend, just it seems like something really awful, worse than the last time it's happening. I mean, it's unclear what is really happening. Perhaps Carrie Lam, the leader, is just taking advice from hardliners. Maybe she's being squeezed by Beijing because they don't want to concede. But the only thing that everyone is just used to now is just everything escalating even further. And, I mean, no one yet has died directly from a police assault, or, you know, a police hasn't died from a protest throwing a Molotov at them or anything. But it just seems like every day we edge closer to that.
Certainly does. And let's say now that Beijing decides to become more involved. Say we see Chinese troops really pushing into Hong Kong. Where do you see that going?
Well, people here don't really think about Chinese troops in the same way that I think people outside do, because of, well, people here live with the troops here already. They're stationed in barracks all over the city, and also over the city they came out actually to clear up bricks. That was not invited by the Hong Kong government actually, and is not legal in accordance with the constitution. And actually all the things that the police have been doing are every bit as brutal or violent as one would expect an armed force to be doing. So it's not really clear to people here how it would be different if the army came, but it would have much greater international reverberations.
Certainly would. And these pictures, we're seeing them on the screen now. The city's burning. The city is literally burning. It looks like something out of a Hollywood film. Such dramatic images we are seeing coming in. Tell me, what sort of impact, Isabella, do you see this having long-term in Hong Kong?
Well, there's now a lot of discussion about health effects of all the tear gas that's being fired just in any neighborhood that you could think of. A lot of worries over what the government is covering up. They're not really saying anything about the toxic components of this gas. And just like you said, a lot of damaged facilities affecting the way that people go to work or just go out socially on the weekend. You know, that's the kind of thing, however, that people can kind of get used to. But I think what the government's trying to do here is basically drive a wedge between the sort of more radical side and the sort of more moderate side, hoping that the movement will die out. And but that's also not been happening. And if anything, it shows that people are even more united in the anger of the police and the government.
Certainly, and Isabella, you know, it really does have a lasting sort of image on people who are visiting the city. And, you know, I know a lot of people, a lot of friends who've lived there, and they're just devastated to see the way it's all going. Isabella Steger, really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Now, in the US, at least 8 witnesses are scheduled to testify in the second week of open hearings in the impeachment inquiry against US President Donald Trump. Trump taking to Twitter criticising Mike Pence's special aide, Jennifer Williams, after the transcript of her closed-door testimony was released. But all eyes are now set to be on Wednesday's testimony from EU Ambassador Gordon Sondland. He's already revised his testimony once. Here's Kenneth Motton.
As the House impeachment inquiry prepares for 3 more days of public hearings this week, Democrats are not wavering.
The President of the United States used taxpayer-funded military assistance to pressure a foreign leader to help him in his re-election campaign.
Republicans are pushing back.
The evidence is crumbling. I think the Democrats know they're in trouble on this.
Over the weekend, the committee releasing transcripts of the closed-door testimony from Jennifer Williams, a member of Vice President Pence's staff. Williams was on that July 25th phone call in which Trump brought up investigating the Bidens in the 2016 election. She testifies she remembers the mention of Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company where Hunter Biden served on the board. But the transcript of the call released by the White House makes no mention of Burisma. The president blasting Williams on Sunday, tweeting, "Tell Jennifer Williams, whoever that is, to read both transcripts of the presidential calls. She should meet with the other Never-Trumpers, who I don't know and mostly never even heard of, and work out a better presidential attack." That tweet coming just days after Trump attacked former Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch as she was testifying.
I think part of it is his own insecurity as an imposter. I think he knows full well that he's in that office way over his head, and so he has to diminish everyone else.
She used the word imposter. I'm talking about the President of the United States, who 63 million people voted for.
But House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on CBS saying the president will have every opportunity to present his case.
Let's go now to sport. And Barcelona teammates and superstars Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez are set to go head-to-head tonight in a high-profile friendly soccer match here in Tel Aviv between Argentina and Uruguay. Argentina committed to its match after cancelling another game against Israel prior to the 2018 World Cup, but almost pulled the pin once again due to a recent flare-up between Israel and Palestinian faction Islamic Jihad. Now, for more on this story, let's hear from Sarah Williamson, who attended Uruguay's team practice.
Well, in the lead-up to the friendly exhibition match between Uruguay and Argentina to be held in Tel Aviv on Monday, the Uruguay football team have been practicing here in Netanya with their legendary coach, Oscar Washington Tabarez, holding a press conference for the media ahead of the match. Now, the question on every reporter's lips here today was whether the recent escalation in tensions between Gaza and Israel was of any concern to the Uruguay football team and their coach. Let's take a listen to what he had to say on that matter.
When the news started to arrive, we felt uncomfortable. The families reacted. They were worried about the situation here. But I'm glad our soccer association decided we should play. It's my first time in Israel, and we're playing a match against our big rivals, Argentina.
Now, another question that was of interest to the reporters was why a country like Israel, which is small in population and small in football community, why would countries like Argentina and Uruguay want to come and play the match here? Now, Oscar Tabarez said that no matter where you are in the world, football brings people together, and he wants to encourage people to play all over the world.
I'm not surprised about the excitement here. Soccer connects people around the world more than any other sport. It's a good challenge for a team to come play in Israel.
And of course, as this press conference is currently ongoing, the players are outside preparing for that match tomorrow against Argentina, with Israeli football fans flocking to get a glimpse at some of their favourite players. Now, of course, the game tomorrow is going to be the biggest exhibition match in Israel's history, with 30,000 tickets already being sold, selling out the stadium here in Tel Aviv.
And finally, colourful balloons, all shapes and sizes, filling the skies over the Mexican city of Leon. On Friday, as the International Balloon Festival celebrated its 18th edition. Now, this festival started back in 2002 and draws massive crowds, reportedly over 400,000 people, alongside pilots from around the world. Now, according to the organisers, the Lyon Festival brings the world's top 3 events of its kind. And that is all we have time for this edition of I24 News, but we are continuing to bring you all of the breaking stories. Go ahead, visit us online. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.